Hey everyone, it's Jan, and I wanted to do maybe 1 or 2 videos on some techniques that I have been coming up with or discovering while I was playing with the new Tim Holtz texture fades. These are really awesome. I have 4 sets of them, and I know that there are several more, but these are the ones that I got to start out with, and I know that I'll be collecting the rest of them as I can because they're just fantabulous. I love that they give you a really deep impression on whatever you're embossing. Like me, you want to maximize your tools. When you get something, you want to find all the ways that you can use it. So I want to show you some things that I've done, and then I'm going to break it down and do some demonstrations on some of these techniques. This one I probably won't demonstrate, but I want to show you that if you use Glimmer Mist with it and spray different areas, you can get a multicolored background. So even if you don't want to do anything more, using the Glimmer Mist after you have sprayed the paper allows the mica, the shimmery stuff to settle down in the embossed areas. Very cool technique. So the next one I want to demonstrate is this brick. And I'm going to clear everything off and I'll come back and show you how I did this. But isn't that just fantabulous? Okay, so come back and we'll get this one started. Okay, so let's talk about how I achieved this particular look on this texture fade. I'm using the brick plate, but one of the things that I did with this that really I figured out the hard way, when I started trying to do this, I'm working on a mini for my son, and I want it to have a little bit of a industrial grungy look, so I was really trying to recreate some old brick with this. And I started with some lighter weight cardstock, and I found that it didn't take as much of the embossing and the soaking in the ink as well as I liked. So I ended up using some of my stamping weight cardstock, and that is actually a little bit heavier. It's the paper that I use when I am going to be coloring images with markers or with colored pencils. And because it's a little heavier and these give such a great deep impression, you just get a very, very, very deeply etched image. And I know that you'll be surprised, but I started with white when I created this one. So start by getting your 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, because these are A2 sized paper. Cut it down to size and emboss it. And then the first step that we're going to do, let me tell you the other things that you're going to need. I used Fired Brick Distress Ink, the Black Soot Distress Ink, and I'm really going to recommend these 2 tools for this particular technique only because you really want something that will stay flat against the surface, and then you need something that'll do detail work. Then I'm going to use 2 colors of Glimmer Mist, and I used Brick and Suede, but I think you would probably get a very similar look if you used Burnt Red or any of the darker reds that you have, and then a lighter brown. I didn't really want to use the Tattered Leather because I think that would be a little dark. So let's start with getting our little spray here. And the key to this step really is saturating the cardstock. And I'm going to start with a little bit of suede. I'm going to put this on in layers. And unlike we normally do with Glimmer Mist, I am going to mix my colors. I want them to look a little bit. I've got a lot of Glimmer Mist on there. And now I'm going to take my heat tool, and I'm actually going to let you watch this process a little bit, because part of the key to this is moving the fluid that is falling into the cracks back and forth while you're drying it. So you're getting some nice deep edge color. So I dry it on this side, leaning, tilting it this way, and then I'll turn it around and bring it back the other way while I dry it. Concentrate on some areas where I see it pooling up, and then I'll turn it around and go the other way. Okay, so now that you've kind of seen that process, I'm going to not make you watch Glimmer Mist dry. Okay, so we're ready to go on to step 2 of our technique of really grunging up this brick background. So while this is a really pretty red, I mean, I like it, it's really good, but we just want to take it up one more notch. And I told you as we were working on it that I work with the really thick weight cardstock for a couple reasons. The other reason, one was that it gives you a really nice deep etching, but the other is that when you're working with this technique, you'll notice that even though I've saturated the paper with the Glimmer Mist, it hasn't soaked all the way through. And what that means is this paper can still take more ink into it without it beginning to kind of disintegrate. So that's another reason that you want, when you're doing one of these kinds of techniques where you're layering a fluid dye on top of, an ink dye on top of a fluid dye, you want the paper to be able to stand up to the extra distressing. So now I'm going to take fired brick and I'm going to get ink all over my distress tool. And really what you want is to just, like you normally do, work in circular motions. We're not going to put it everywhere. I'm just going to highlight some areas where the brick might not be as worn down as it was in others. So I'm just going to add a little intensity to the red color here. And because you're working with a flat tool, you're only going to hit the highlight, the part that is embossed, and it'll kind of help bring out the space between the bricks a little bit, because that'll be the lighter color. Okay, so now that I've done that, the last step that I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight these edges with black soot. And for that, I'm going to want to use one of these little finger daubers so that I have more control over where I put this ink. And so I'm just going to kind of follow my edge here and start with light strokes to highlight it, and then if I want to blend that out a little bit, I'll start at the edge of where I want the darkest color and just flick out. Just kind of watch where everyone's going. Each time you do this, it's going to be different, so you just get to play with it. I love how Tim Holtz has made these not solid images. He called them texture fades because they really do, many of them fade out at the edges, and it just is a different look from any of the embossing folders that we've had to work with in the past. And I'm just loving these. Very fun. So you can see I'm just putting a little bit of soot. Maybe there was a fire near this brick. I don't know. But I love that it gives it a really cool distress look. And I can blend that in a little more so it's not quite so stark. But that's how you get this grungy distressed brick look. I hope you'll come back and join me. I'm going to show you some more techniques that I've been doing with the texture fades, and I hope you'll join me. In the meantime, go play.